Hey there, everyone. It is Irene Lyon, and welcome to this entire world of nervous system health and healing. And today I definitely have a story of this for you. I had the opportunity of speaking to one of my very first students who took part in my online work back in the day, back in 2015, 16, we believe. David Magness is his name. I will post our first talk near this, and I really encourage you to check that one out because you can really see the difference in his regulation, his vitality, his capacity. And in this discussion that I have for you today, it's more of an open-ended, meandering discussion about his world, his life, his career, how it's shifted, bringing in this nervous system work into his coaching practice, all of the things that have shifted in the last 7 years for him. I think they say that we can create a new human body over 7 years when we think of things breaking down and regenerating. And I would say that he has definitely done that. We discussed just how important it is for us to do this work slowly, in a self-paced way, and to just keep going and not give up. So thank you, David, for doing this work and dedicating really your life to it. And for all of you here who are new to me, just a little time-sensitive note that we will be running SmartBody SmartMind, this online program that he went through, very soon. Again, if you're seeing this, hearing this, when this goes live, we will be opening up registration September 13th through to the 19th. This is 2022. Of course, if you're here after those dates, just look on our page and see when we run this program again and get on the wait list and join when you can. And all of David's links, if you want to do some coaching with him, and I highly recommend it, he is fully nervous system and trauma informed, will be also near this interview. Enjoy our discussion. Hello, David.
Hi again, Irene. Good to see you.
Yes, we have been in contact for quite a while.
Yes. Yeah, it seems like almost like a new person since I've sort of undertaken this kind of work. So I feel very different, we'll say, which
Yes,
I'm sure we're going to be talking about.
we will. We will. And I was just refreshing my memory by looking at the first time we chatted, and it looks like I posted that video in 2017. However, I think you said that you probably started this work with me through the courses. At that time, it wasn't Smart Body, Smart Mind. It was, I think, the New Inner Game,
Yeah.
if that rings a bell.
Hmm.
That was 2016.
Yeah.
So that's 7 years.
Yeah. I guess it's pushing 7 years now. Yeah, 6, 7 years.
They do say that you can create a whole new body in 7 years. So,
Yeah, I would, in terms of nervous system resiliency and capacity, all the things that are the claims made in your marketing by your course have happened. It hasn't happened overnight.
mhm.
But it's happened as I've become very passionate about this work as well,
Yeah.
even to the point where it's really influencing my own work and my own service offering.
Let's talk about
Okay.
that. Let's start with what you're doing now, and then we'll maybe go to how things were 7 years ago. But what are you doing now with your work?
It's it's still in the coaching space, although I'm really looking to probably move beyond that into more of a more therapeutics and practicing.
Mhm.
Um, if I was to do it all, live my life over again, I think I would have just gone that route anyway.
Yeah.
But I'm a convert, well, you might say, for all things somatic and all things nervous system trauma resolving. And,
Yeah.
throw in all the attachment theory as well, and complex PTSD and all that. And then I'm really about it. You talk to me long, I always tell people that, it's like, you talk to me long enough, it's going to come up. We're going to be talking about
Yeah.
that kind of stuff. So I'm just seeing, clients one-on-one, and with
Yeah.
the hopes of eventually, developing some elements of course or group work. But for the most part, I feel like I'm just being reintroduced to myself, so I'm just taking it slow.
Hmm.
I'm not a millionaire or anything like that yet, but I definitely feel a lot blessed in greater ways, I'd say, than just wealth. Mm.
Yeah. Well, if I just even, I mean, we're
Yeah.
friends as well, just for those listening. So we've gotten to know each other over the years. We've had dinners and shared a glass of wine or two together. And if I think back to when we did meet more professionally, and even just looking at your our video, obviously we've aged, and yet I sense when I look at ourselves 7 years ago, we also look vibrant in a different way. And you certainly, I mean, we're both tanned right now
Mm.
because it's summer. But take us back to what things were like 8, 10 years ago when you were pre-nervous system work. What was up? What was going on? Just to give people a refresher if they haven't watched our first talk, which most people probably haven't because it was so long
I was
ago.
surprised actually to see it myself at the end of the 3-part video series. I'm like, oh, there I am. But I was, I guess dealing with all the things that a lot of people are going through. It was so much frustration, right, with mental health concerns, and depression tendencies. Very anxious, very socially anxious. Um,
Hmm.
Negative coping strategies, lots of those. So whether escapism in all its forms. Um, but also, I think the big component was a lack of safety that really got in the way of exploration, of all things. So like this
Hmm.
ability of perfectionism. So
Hmm.
I can't go out and really play in the world because I might do it wrong or do it at a level that's just unacceptable. So I was just shut down, to the point where my world was very small,
Yeah.
and I was very sad and very frustrated, very sad and angry, I guess. Um,
Hmm.
Flip screen to now, I guess, and I like to think that, yeah, I 100% feel more vibrant, um, but I also feel more embodied and present. And I always remember you talking about this multitasking thing. So when you're talking right now, that you have access to your feet on the ground, your bum on the chair, your back at the back, you're feeling the feeling of your body in the space that you're in. And I was always like, what are you talking about? I don't know what that is. I don't know. Because when I just enmesh with the person, right, I just lose myself in the other.
So for those that are listening, maybe this gets edited in, probably not. We just had a Wi-Fi glitch on your end.
Mm-hmm.
The gods were maybe they were just cheering on your multitasking embodiment, which we were just talking about.
Thank you for that. That bookmark, it's appreciated because I tend to
Yeah.
forget.
So
But
what I'm going to say, because for those listening, they might not know what multitasking means, because that often means like busy doing like all sorts of things.
mhm.
There's a thing that I teach quite early on in the work that I call multitasking awareness, and it's this ability to stay connected to multiple things, awareness to self, environment, your breath, your movements, how your head is sitting, are you slouched, while still engaging with either the person you're with or the task or the driving or the reading or the typing. And most people, when they start this, and I'd love to hear your experience. I know you touched a little bit on it, but they'll be like, "That's impossible." Like, what do you mean? And trust me when I say we are built for that multitasking embodiment and awareness, but we have been so taken out of that through culture and stress and school system and staying in our head that it just almost seems like impossible when you first start it. So what would be, do you remember a moment other than it just kind of slowly creeping in when it started to kind of show up and blossom, if I use that
I
word?
think it was with a client, actually, to tell you the truth, because I think
Okay.
I might have been explaining it with a client, and it was a real realization. It's like, wow, even though the person, it was an intense session, and the person was having
Mhm.
a bit of a emoting, strong, intense emotions, and I was like fine, and it's really like with the person, connected to myself, connected to the ground, my environment, but also really holding the space really well for that client.
Mhm.
Which was shocking, right? Because I just, even socially, like this enmeshment that happens with socially, I'm just losing myself in the other's condition or state, was so prevalent. So this idea that you're like, yeah, you're doing all these things, but you're also very aware of, and not in a self-conscious way, but just in this awareness, mindful
Yeah.
way, that you can feel your feet on the ground and just feel sort of how you are postural wise.
Yeah.
It was quite. it's a strange thing to, I don't know, it's a strange thing to talk about because it's so experiential, but it's important. I feel that it's very important in terms of being embodied and being present. And
Mm-hmm.
that kind of feedback has come quite, through quite often in talking with, colleagues or acquaintances and prospects or clients, that there's this level of sort of presence and embodiment and a sense of calm that I'm now sort of espousing, which is, that wasn't really me, I guess, before. I was a little bit more jacked up, a little bit more fast-paced in my speech, um,
Yeah.
a little bit more twitchy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's cool.
Hmm.
You use the word enmeshment a
Hmm.
couple times,
Yeah.
and I get that word a lot in questions that people ask.
Mm.
Irene, what about enmeshment? And because I don't really talk about that, but since you've brought it up, was that something that you were consciously aware of before this work, or did no? Tell me, let's talk about that.
I think that I became more aware of that because you kind of, it was like, it was a pathway that I was led upon by taking the new inner game, right? It was like, okay, because I was going to take something different. I remember when I was making that decision, I was going to take something very different, very
I
almost
don't remember that.
familiar that I was gonna. It was like breathing and yoga based, and it's like,
Hmm.
and you just kind of said that's just going to be more manipulation and covering up of your symptoms, and it was a useful conversation. So you steered me down this path of unresolved trauma in the nervous system, and then that opened up, as different paths open up all this other learning. So I've learned about sort of what enmeshment is in terms of, it's just, for me, I always describe it as losing myself in the other. So it becomes whoever it is, like their problem, their issue, their state, that's everything, and I'm essentially nothing. So I'm completely merged in with that person and what they're going through, to the point where I can't even feel what's going on with me. And in fact, it's so unfelt that it becomes sort of unimportant. So my needs
Yeah.
go unmet. My wants are definitely unmet. I'm fawning like crazy, people pleasing.
Yeah.
And I'm just, maybe even, I'm afraid to voice my opinion if it's counter to the other, for fear of
Mm-hmm.
upsetting that person.
Mm-hmm.
So there's I think a lot that happens with enmeshment, and it feels like it comes with a whole heap of shame as well, because I'll say things, I'm like, I don't agree with that. Why don't you speak up? So then all this guilt and shame comes in because I would be agreeing to things for this sort of enmeshment and fawning, people pleasing,
Yeah.
and it would be like a self betrayal. And it kind of, it might just seem like little small weights and small tolerances, but when you start to add them all together, it becomes this real big juggernaut of feeling that I just wasn't feeling great about myself.
Mm-hmm.
So now
It's
I'm a big pain in the ass now, and I speak my mind a lot more.
some might call that a rabble rouser, or back in the day, if it was a kiddo, you'd be a nuisance. But of
Mm,
course, you're not a nuisance. But yeah, it's like that. I've been having a lot of conversations with people about this, to be honest. Podcast interviews, talking to your peers, even listening to, I love listening to long form podcasts, as you know, because I'm always sharing ones with you. And
mm,
one just the other day, the gentleman was talking about how he was in this sort of state of depression, not most likely clinically, but just didn't want to get out and do things. Someone might say that's agoraphobic, but the story he had is very similar to, say, my husband Seth, whom you also know, and I've talked to Seth about this, where it was so hard to be with people because you were constantly trying to change yourself for each person in the room, and you were constantly on alert trying to figure out, what do they want me to say, how should I be with this person and that person. And what's always interesting when I hear these conversations in a non-nervous system somatic point of view, there's a lot of talk around it being a mindset or a behavior. But as we know, and maybe we can speak about that, how things were when you were growing up, this is deep in how we were raised as little ones. Was it safe to be who we were when we were children? Obviously, we don't remember infancy, but even teenagehood. And was there an inconsistency in how we were raised, and then we go to school and there's another difference, and then we go here and there's another difference. And so there's just never this smooth authenticity and way of being because everyone's a bit different. Does that make sense?
100%, yeah. I obviously cringe the description of it all because it's very, it's very true to my own experience, I think. The inconsistency part, I think, in terms of my own being raised, it was just like, it was a moving goalpost kind of scenario. And it's just like, okay, what do I need to do today to get my needs met, to be, loved, appreciated, not rejected, neglected? And don't want to paint my parents in a horrible light because
No.
I do believe in transgenerational traumas, and I think this is just fed down our line, my own lineage. And
Mhm.
I'm British raised. Both my grandparents fought in World War II. My grandparents went through depressions. So, there's a
Yeah.
lot of stuff there that's being passed down. But the inconsistencies were huge, and having to be who I thought either my mother or my father wanted me to be, to get the sort of care and love and response that I felt that I needed. I think the response is and that response is largely affection and attention. Um, so it was huge, and that does embed. I've learned a lot more about attachment theory and worked with sort of insecure attachment around that old child wounding, um,
Mhm.
which I think is amazing work because who'd have thought that something that happens in the first 2 years of our life is such an impact and colors the way we view our adult life, but it absolutely does. So it's been pretty wild in terms of getting to know myself more, doing quite a bit of reparenting,
Mhm.
um, but also just letting the body just have its say and just acquiescing to that wisdom. It takes a lot of pressure off, to tell you the truth. Once you start to develop that language, and I do consider it a new language, the
Yeah.
felt sense is learning a new language and developing that relationship with the body.
Yeah.
Once that's done, it takes so much pressure off. Because, like, what's the body think? You just trust that, and then the body steers me around. That's why I'm out here. That's why I'm out west. I mean, I would
Right.
never have come out west. I think it was paramount for me to get resolved in my system, for me to be able to live a dream. I've been wanting to come out west, I think, since I was a teenager.
Right.
Took me 30 years. Um,
So for those that don't know you personally, do you mind telling like what was the spark that led to that big move that you guys made
mm,
a little while ago?
yeah, and that's just a strange one too. Because I err on the side of spirituality, but I also did the spiritual bypass dissociation thing like a champ for a while.
To get your gold medal.
Yeah, I got the gold medal for sure. Um, but then when I started to sort of drop into that wisdom of the body, I realized that intuition is heavily linked to gut instinct. So those intuitive spiritual hits or guidances become a lot more easily discerned.
Hmm.
So it was, my girlfriend Gabby and I, we just knew we wanted to leave Toronto. We didn't know where to go. We were all over the map. We were going to go to, you know, Thailand, Bali, Panama, Costa Rica. We were all over the
Yeah.
place. And eventually we just felt into Vancouver Island, which is where I am now.
Yeah.
We'd never been here. We didn't have a place well, we had a place to sort of stay in terms of it was a friend to sort of land with.
Hmm.
But we didn't have jobs. We didn't have apartments lined up. We'd never been here, but it was just like, hell yeah, we're doing that. And we've sort of not looked back, and it's been absolutely wonderful. Looks like I'm getting a package delivered. Um, hi. But yeah, I think it was sort of a heart-led, spirit-led leap of faith, if you will.
Yeah.
That would not
Yeah.
have happened if I didn't have the connection to the body that I had, because it would just been too dangerous.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
it's been really miraculous coming out here too, because
Hmm.
I didn't know I was such a kind of a so enamored by the land. I've gone in a way that's very indigenous in my sort of my outlook of connection to forests and earth and waters. And I felt it in Toronto, but it was tougher.
Yeah.
And then when I came here, like, this is a special place.
Hmm.
But I can feel that specialness, the vibrancy of the earth here.
Hmm.
Thousands of year old trees and really, really beautiful waters and wildlife. So what one might say, I was sort of had to be ready to come out here
Yeah.
to appreciate it out here. So I had
Yeah.
to prepare myself, but it was a leap of faith, especially during the time that we came. What was it, March 31st, 2020 when we left. And it's like, is this the right thing to do? Um,
Probably.
yeah, yeah, exactly, exactly. So it's gone well. I mean, we've not looked back. It's gone really. I always, I think one of the indicators that we were sort of on point in following good guidance and following our hearts and spirit, and I do think that it was very spirit led. I do think there was a bit of a calling to bring us out here.
Hmm.
And me, that was evidenced by the way there was a real parting of the Red Seas, so to speak. Like
Hmm.
we would be offered support unsolicited, offered, seed money or places to stay or whatever. We were just, it was really, really supported in ways that it's probably my greatest experience of having that level of support when you make a real spirit honored decision to do something.
One of the
Yeah,
things, yeah, thank you for
you're
sharing that. One of
welcome.
the commonalities I hear from my peers and colleagues, and now of course you, is when you do get embodied, and that's such a hard word because embodied is thrown out
Mm-hmm.
all over. Let's say embodied within our nervous system and organs and all of those things, to the degree that you've learned about and we teach. There is this safety, and with that safety comes this almost, invincibility is too strong of a word because we all have vulnerabilities, but there's a strong knowing of this is the right path,
Mm-hmm.
even if we don't know what's going to occur. And when I hear of stories of old acquaintances or just things through the grapevine, it's like, life is so shitty. This bad thing keeps happening over and over again. How come I can't get into a right relationship, right job? It, I sometimes feel like a broken record because I said, well, really, you should try some nervous system work. Try, and it's like, come on, Irene, not everything can be solved by that. And while I know you can't necessarily, fix a compound femur fracture just with nervous system work, you'll need to have surgery. It seems like there's a lot of things that do play out in a positive way. Are there any other things that have kind of surprised you in addition to all the good things you've already just talked about? I don't know, relationship or
I think,
health things.
yeah, I think health wise, I definitely feel stronger. I think it's just really nice to feel authentic because to feel like this is the authentic me.
Hmm.
Um, Even like something as trivial and sort of um, just visual that it's just growing my hair longer. And it seems like a
Mm,
strange thing. I just grew my hair long. My hair was short when I came out here. And I just
right.
let it grow, or growing like like facial hair in the way that I'm growing it. So there's even an authenticity of sort of my appearance that feels
Hmm.
more who I am. I know
Hmm.
it's just an appearance, right? It's just hair, but it feels like more than that because it's an authentic expression of who I am that was stifled.
Hmm.
Um, and the reason it was stifled, by the way, is because my mom doesn't really like long hair. So it's like that. It was like,
Ah.
yeah. um, so it was like this thing, like, okay, well, that's great. You cannot like long hair, but I'm going to grow my hair anyway.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I think a lot of things do play into nervous. I'm like you. I tend to maybe think that it's more of a cure-all for everything, but and I now think that we have this beautiful time where we have all these modalities available to us, and it's like a
Hmm.
big buffet of healing. And we get a plate, and we go and we start to scoop stuff on our plate, and some of it
Hmm.
doesn't fit and tastes like crap. We got to scrape it off our plate, get that off of there. But for me, a big helping of my healing plate was filled up with sort of nervous system trauma resolution and somatics, because I just realized how much my body was clinging, hanging on. I had medical traumas as well. Like you talk about a femur, I broke my leg as a 3-year-old, broken arm as
Ooh.
a 7-year-old. I was in hospital. Like I had to be in the hospital a few times when I was younger. So these
Mm.
medical traumas, I woke up out of anesthetic during an operation once. So there's a lot of stuff that can happen in even in the medical world that creates stuff that we have to then overcome.
Yeah.
And although, nervous system work's not going to set that femur, I think it's definitely going to be really important to have the sort of the resiliency, the capacity to sort of deal with the impact trauma that happened with that femur, and the healing, being in a cast for like whatever I was. I mean, that's traumatic in itself. So I think it's very important. But I think it's just the relationship to the body. I think I think it's paramount. We're going through the nervous system because that's the feelers of the body, right? They're largely so.
Yeah.
But I think what you do is essentially just teach such a wonderful relationship that is fractured, unfortunately, largely fractured to most people in the Western world. And I do say Western world because I do think it's different in second and third world, where they're more community village minded. We're not supposed to do this rugged individualism experiment in the Western civilization is a failure. We're not supposed to live as rugged individualists. We're supposed to be village and community based. Yet you can't be in a village and community and have someone care about you if you're terrified of them. So yeah.
Bingo.
Yeah. So, and I'm still looking at that, right? Because I want to, the way the world's, moving now, I'm thinking, getting an intimate village community, almost, I want to say commune, but it's a bit too hippie-ish. But I'm, yeah.
Let's talk about the commune idea.
Okay.
So, only because this has been a very interesting topic that's come up a little bit, and I was just talking to Seth about it, and also another interview show I was on yesterday, and I said, well, think about it this way. If you were to take someone who grew up in the Western world, if we call it that, I don't even know what the right term is anymore, but more industrialized, everything is at your fingertips kind of world. Everything's being repressed. Parents aren't on the same page, as you mentioned, so the kid is having to micromanage and fawn, and surgical traumas and all the things, right? If you were to take that person and plunk them just into the natural world with the ability to find their food and hunt and have shelter and water, it wouldn't be enough. And I know that from enough discussions with folks like my husband who tried to do that and did go into the jungles of Hawaii with nothing but a backpack and lived with the land. But he even will say, I had no knowledge of how much survival stress I was hiding and I was bypassing. He was doing a lot of other good work. And so it's almost like, because we are humans that have figured out this modernization, you can't have that communal living until either everyone is in agreement that we have to do this work, or everyone's had at least some foundational capacity built, so that you're not re-traumatizing more people and the children that are born. Because I've had some really interesting conversations with people our age who were brought up in more cult-like commune, we could say hippie situations, where they're being passed around to people and left with the neighbors and not abused, but mama's not there. This isn't normal. And so that creates the stress, even though they're in this idyllic, natural world. It's interesting. So I'm curious if you have any thoughts on that, because it's like we want that world of natural communal living, but then we have this grand experiment that we've been working with that it feels like there needs to be cleanup before we can do that.
Yeah, I know Seth's story. I like Seth's story. I think there's a bit of a trend, right? To people just want to kind of bug out and go live in the woods and be fully off-grid, self-sustained, but whether it's just themselves or just themselves and a partner. Unfortunately, I actually tell that I laugh about this because it's kind of irritating. But in terms of like the trauma and the trauma and the attachment, so all of the trauma typically happens, this developmental trauma happens in relationship.
Yes.
And the healing requires relationship. So it's like basically the diagnosis and the prescribed solution is relationships, and it's very frustrating because it's like, really, I can't just do this by myself with rugged individualism. Like, nope, you need community. You got to get comfortable with your own skin, and you've got to let people in, and you've got to allow for that, and not only allow for it, but you've got to celebrate it and enjoy it. And that is probably where I'm growing into that a little bit more. It could be a bit of a lonely, sometimes it could be a bit of a lonely place, because the world, I do see the world as a bit unwell. So it's like, yeah. So who I'm letting in is important, because if people are too disruptive, then you've got to kind of lovingly let that person go, which can hurt. I mean, I never let anyone go in my life without feeling a certain way about it. I'm not cold-hearted that way. But to live in a commune just when we're used to this sort of, again, this individualistic kind of way of doing things, I think it largely there'd be so much friction. There would be a lot of people wanting it a certain way, and there would be a lot of little arguments that would happen. So I could see it almost being a bit of a disaster. Until people, I don't know, get this kind of level of work and understanding, and that sort of ability to regulate that you teach, the ability to regulate and knowing, and I'm still discerning that, this isn't I wouldn't call, there's no finished product here, I don't think. So there's an element of like, what's my stuff, what's their stuff? Where's the line here? What's my responsibility to take ownership for, versus what isn't? And that was such a challenge, because I would take everything on, everything. So if I was having a person treated me like badly, I thought it was all me, not like they're 100% right, I'm 100% wrong, and but it's just never the case.
So you've come out of that distinction, or that fogginess would be a better way of saying it.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, I don't get it right all the time, but I'm less inclined to take 100% accountability and responsibility for someone else's behavior now.
Yeah. I think too, the interesting thing about humans, again, this has been on my mind a lot, is that we have that mammalian co-regulated need for that connection. As you said, so much of this stuff happens in the first couple of years of our life, and if it isn't done well, it's as if we're trying to figure it out in perpetuity until we find the right things to help that. But then we also have this brain and this incredible creative spark that no one really knows exactly, I don't think, where it comes from, whether it's the soul or something's given to us. It's an interesting one, because I don't think humans realize how complex our systems are when we consider the mammalian physiology that needs survival and attachment and safety and all the things, but then also this computer that sits in between our ears that creates the stuff that's allowing us to talk like this. I mean, I say this all the time, but it still amazes me that these things have been created only by us, at least here on planet Earth. And we have a lot to work with, don't we?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that evolutionary aspect too, like evolution is a slow-moving boat. And the last 100 years, think about the last 100 years, what's changed in the last 100 years alone. Our physiology is really, really taxed to try to keep up with that. And it seems to be speeding up. When I think there's actually a real impetus and a real strong sense of people wanting to sort of take the foot off the gas and slow down, and very much unplug in a lot of ways. We talked about, even prior to recording, we talked about Wi-Fi versus Ethernet and all that. And so this level of sort of having access to this sort of internet anywhere we go, everywhere we go, is that a good thing? I don't know, right? I mean, there's no real study on it. I mean, we are an experiment in that regard. It's a new technology. So I think it's been quite damaging in a lot of ways. So we have to sort of figure out how to navigate that now, how to change that. And I think a big part of that is learning how to be comfortable, embodied, and safe in our own skin without a distraction. Can you go into a space or into the woods and just sit there and be content with watching the birds move around the trees, the wind across the water? Is that enough for you? Is that enough stimulation for you? And if it isn't, why isn't it? So I think dopamine. I think a lot of people talk about dopamine reward center and how hacked
Right.
that got with all this, high stimulation things
Yeah.
that we have, and then we need those things. We just can't
Mm.
we can't do boring anymore. But I'm give me boring, a lot of boring. I like a lot of just I'll sit and watch the water and the trees and the birds, and that's good enough for me. Where before maybe I would want to be running to go do the other next highly stimulating thing versus doing what
Yeah.
I'm doing now.
I had a text from one of your peers in SmartBody SmartMind who will also be doing the SED, the Sciintuitive
Awesome.
beta program that we're going to start up, and and again, more of a close friend because I've known this gentleman for a while, and he's like, I'm kind of bored, Irene. I don't know if it's because I'm not activated anymore and I'm actually regulated, or if I need to find a different, like a hobby. And I was like, I really can't answer that question. But I have heard through the grapevine from many people that there is this feeling like once you land in deeper, in SE, we would call it these energy wells of greater regulation. There is this feeling like you should be doing more. We should be do what, do this, right? And then it can feel like boredom. Have you had that out of curiosity with this shift towards more slow paced being with the lake in the woods?
Yeah, I think I've taken a very much. I've taken good notice and mentorship from nature, and
Mm-hmm.
how she operates and things operate in the external world. And there's never really any rushing. I don't see a whole lot of rushing going on. Certainly, there's rushing, appropriate rushing, which you talk about if it's a predator
Sure.
chasing prey and all that. But yeah, I think from my upbringing, there was a large amount of addicted to pain, suffering, and drama
Mm-hmm.
in my house. So it's like gossiping, drama, um, explosive temper expressions. So it becomes with all that's quieted down, it could be like, oh, it's really quiet and boring. But um, and then there's the other side of that too, because I think it took me a while to figure out that I was functionally frozen and what that felt like. What I like to feel like when I was getting into sympathetic activation and to feel that parasympathetic shutdown. Now I can feel it really accurately. This lethargy, this tiredness, this wanting to take a nap. It's like what's going on? What's my body afraid of feeling right now that this parasympathetic shutdown's coming in? That one's I think that came kind of later too, because it was all theory in your work and going through the program. And then when I really started to feel like, oh, that's what's happening. So it's like this heightened state of sympathetic activation, and then the parasympathetic is like, just nope, that's too much. Shut everything down. And it always makes me it tears me up a little bit to know the relationship that I'm having with the body now. And I get teary because there's a bit of grief. I would say underlying grief because maybe lost time and having to do the work and sort of the fact that I didn't have this relationship in the past, and but it is what it is. So I deal with the present now. But it's a beautiful thing to be in such close relationship to the body now. And again, as I said before, it just takes a lot of pressure off because you just know where more accurately what's good for me, what's not good for me, where what's resonating, what's not resonating. There's less questioning.
Mm-hmm.
I know I spent a lot of time questioning in my life, and it's exhausting.
Yeah.
Hmm.
I just want to say there's a little bit of pride because as I talk to you guys and hear your lingo, you're just speaking with that nervous system language so freaking effortlessly.
Mm.
And obviously, there's going to be new folk watching this who have no idea what you just said. And that's okay.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter because, again, this comes back to this higher brain that we have
Hmm.
that does want to understand what's going on. And we've been trying to teach people to be calm, be calm, carry on, or silence your thoughts, or sit with your body and just be with whatever floats through. But if we don't have a little bit more of a cognitive understanding of what's actually going on in a system that wasn't given what exactly it needed to have growing up, just like all the other animals in the wild got what they needed, pretty much. It's such a strange thing to think about that,
Hmm.
but all the mammals and like they were treated well by their mamas unless the mama was like taken out by a predator,
Yeah.
right? And so to get to that mastery, I'm going to call it, David, of being able to notice your functional freeze and the sympathetic and have the knowing that the parasympathetic shutdown is coming on, and it's to me it's revolutionary because I don't think, correct me if I'm wrong, there's been a population of people or even a small group of people that have had that skill in the history of humanity. And it's just so neat to see it. Hence, maybe why it brings a little emotion because it's so new.
Yeah, there is. I think it's double. I agree with all that, and I accept that you should be probably very prideful about your efforts to train us and teach us in the ways because you're groundbreaking, right? I think you even report that you had some friction in your world about doing what you wanted to do, and I I tell clients that now to our prospects. I'm like, learn what's going on with your physiology, with your biology. It's helpful because it's calming. Like, oh, when you know, it just reduces the uncertainty.
Yeah.
So now you're kind of there's more certainty around what's going on. Like, oh, that's a biological system that's happening. So it's for me, it's a calming aspect because the brain can spin, right? I find the brain can just spin us out a little bit
Yeah.
and worry, and that's why, in my opinion, I'm of the opinion, and you probably steered me towards this, that the brain is not a really good leader. I think that the body should be leading with a very, very good right hand man, and that right hand man is the brain.
Yeah.
So,
Well
but it,
said.
yeah. So yeah,
Yeah, I like that.
yeah. Thank you. But it's been helpful to sort of again, and in connecting to like nature as well. Nature can really, it's a visceral thing when you're embodied and feel into your body and have that sense of real connectedness with your own self, and then you go out into a beautiful landscape such as we're blessed to live in. It's different. It's very different. And I keep saying to Gabby, I go out into the woods and I'm like, does everything always look like this? Was everything because there's this vibrancy. It's almost just like, and people talk about the spiritual was just different dimensions, 3D, 5D. Like, have we gone to 5D? I mean, everything just seems more. There's more spectrums of colors. There's more spectrums of light. Everything's more there, and I believe that's not. It could possibly the changing of the world, but it's I believe more the eyes that I'm viewing it with. So
I think so. I think I I'm of the belief that the 3D world 4 and 5 are always happen all at the same time,
mm,
and it's quite individual, and so I have had that experience too where yeah, and it sort of takes your breath away,
yeah,
and it can bring like joy and that that vitality, but it can also have a deep quality of emotion that is not sad so much but just struck with beauty to the point where you're teary.
yeah.
I've had both of those experiences. I'm sure you have too.
Mm.
I want to ask, so you're like 7 years in to when you were originally introduced. Someone might be thinking, what? 7 years? Do you still practice the physical exercises, or are you kind of sailing in your own world of creating your own way of being with your body? Do you have a practice around the nervous system, or
I think
what do you do?
I think my go-tos are definitely basic orienting, following impulse. It's just for me. It's just honoring the body, what it needs,
Yeah.
and then taking in the environment, just like pausing and just looking around. So that's sort of basic orienting as well. I think those are my kind of my go-tos. And then when I do find if I'm getting really spun out, there is elements of somatic touch that I like. I think hand on heart is probably one of my biggest go-tos.
Yeah.
Um, or even just like I went through a process the other day where I was just cupping my wrist, and there was all this dialogue that happened because I was cupping my unfavored hand, my right hand,
Yeah.
left-handed. So I was cupping, and there was all this. My wrist had a lot to say, and it
Mm-hmm.
had a lot to say in being sort of like, oh, I'm sort of unwanted. I'm not the favored hand.
Mm.
So it was interesting to know that there was this sort of, even at little parts of the body, there was a dialogue that could happen, and that when even when that happens, there's this sort of shared intimacy of even the parts of our body. So there's stuff that I do just because I'm genuinely somatically curious now.
Mm-hmm.
So I try to build that, and then I think the biggest things that I do is largely try to connect with nature as much as possible. Go
Yeah.
barefoot, go swimming, get out into the forests. Take in all the beautiful green that surrounds me.
Mm-hmm.
That's a huge part. I like to think, as much as I would give you kudos and credit, and I consider you my main mentor. I have to tip my hat to Gaia and Mother Nature to helping me heal as well. But
Oh yeah.
yeah,
Oh yeah.
yeah,
Well, she's informing both of us, so
yeah.
it's it's a powerful structure, the earth and all
Hmm.
the nature and the beauty and the elements, and we're part of it.
Yeah.
We're part of it. Anything else that you want to share, talk about in this journey, our 7 year check-in?
I think as part of this, I think you were alluding to, it's like 7 years, and that's like everyone's looking for the hack, right? One of
Yeah.
the first books, if I'm bringing on a new client, or even I'm just talking to someone about about books that people, I always suggest this book. I don't even know the author. I'm sorry, but it's called Mastery, and it's a book. It's a really short book. The guy's a former fighter pilot, and now he's an Aikido teacher, sensei. So, and he just talks about mastery being there's no shortcuts, and you
Hmm.
know there's a lot of things you're gonna plateau. There's gonna be periods of boring,
Hmm.
but that's mastery. And it's
Hmm.
once you get past the novelty of something,
Hmm.
you don't just quit
Hmm.
because mastery is to persevere and keep going even when things aren't like novel. So I think that's when we talk about like this work, and I'm still doing basic orienting and like liking that process, or still working with my kidney adrenals when I feel like they're
Yeah.
kind of like this. So
Me too.
yeah, so it's is that like that's not new, that's not novel. I've done this before, but in
Hmm.
terms of self mastery, which I believe everyone would be benefited by being on a pathway towards self mastery. Um, I think you have to be able to have a certain level of tolerance for boring.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that I'm trying to remember the author of that book because I
Mm.
know the book. I can see the it's small. It's
Yep.
like light beige with like a red
Yeah.
trim around
Yeah.
it.
You got it.
And yeah, in that book, he writes the essence of novelty is what is it? Is boring. Like the true mastery, as you said, comes in the repetition of the familiar
Yeah.
over and over
Yeah.
again. And it's like anyone who's a trained martial artist at black belt level will say you still have to do your katas, you still have to
Yeah.
connect to the ground, you still have to breathe and feel the basics because they're the anchors to
Hmm.
all the fancy stuff,
Yeah.
right?
I always think I use the because I'm fulfilling a lifelong dream of learning how to play guitar, which is actually going a lot
Oh,
better actually than it
cool.
has in the past when I tried it as a teenager. But I couldn't. I just couldn't sit with it. I didn't have the like attention, or it was I just was. I couldn't tolerate sucking as bad as I can now. Now it's like, yeah, you suck, and it's like, yeah, well, you'll learn. Like there's just gentleness. There's more of a gentleness now.
Mm-hmm.
But if you think about mastery of like and repetition, like learning the scales or going through the same chords over and over and over and over again, it's not novel. It's kind of boring sometimes, but you got to
Mm-hmm.
embed that muscle memory. And I don't know when we got so impatient that we needed the hack, the biohack, and the shortcut. I'm also of the opinion now there's no shortcuts. In fact, any shortcut is actually a long cut. It's just gonna take you more time because you've wasted time.
I gotta
Um,
quote you on that one. Yeah. That's a good question. Where did the biohack come from? My hunch, I'd love to hear yours, is we finally realize how much healing we need because we've realized how much damage we've done
Mm.
with just the way we've created this human experiment. And everyone's like, okay, we need to fix it real fast.
Yeah.
So let's figure out the fastest way to pop a pill or stimulate the vagus nerve, which has become a very common one.
Oof.
To, yeah, that's a whole other story in
Yeah.
itself. But I personally understand the desire to want to biohack things.
Same.
But like you said, it often falls short.
Yeah. Well, from our perspective, our beliefs, right? It took generations to create us this way. So 7 years, it's a
It's
fraction of
pretty
that
good.
time, right? It's pretty good.
It's pretty good.
It's pretty fast. And if we're talking about the soul's expression, the eternal soul, 7 years, what the hell's that? It's nothing. It's nothing. So I think we just got our relationship to time is a bit skewed. And I actually think it was a bit of a industrial revolution, capitalism, everything has to be bigger, faster, stronger. Six-minute abs and all that kind of stuff. So I think that all played into it in advertising and marketability.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, it went a bit too far. There used to be ethics in advertising, used to be laws against false advertising, and now it's just a free-for-all. It's a wild, wild west out there. You can say and do whatever. And it's just, buyer beware, buyer beware. Even if the person's using all kinds of psychological sales hacks and mind manipulation to get you to buy a certain thing, buyer beware. I'm like, well, that's just not really fair, is it? So I think we got here chasing the dollar, to tell you the truth. I think we were just a bit too adamant about chasing the dollar and being capitalists, and there was a lot of suffering along the way. But I am a capitalist. It's like I'm not a socialist or anything like that. So politically
As am
speaking,
I.
yeah, politically speaking, I'm not into socialism, but
Yeah.
I do
Well, we
think,
haven't.
yeah,
No, sorry, we haven't figured out a way to make it work where there still isn't the person at the top getting everything.
yes, yeah.
That's the part that we seem to not be able to have not quite figured out yet.
I believe that largely we are that way. I think most human beings, if you take the status quo, we are that way. But
I agree.
there's some greedy buggers on this planet that are just messing everything up.
Well, on that note, I
Hmm.
mean, as you know, it costs money to do this work with me.
Yeah,
Um, but my sense is, and I know again, your peers will say it's worth it, and it lasts for a very long time. Anything final? Any final words of nervous system wisdom,
yeah.
Mr. Magness?
I think,
Before.
like you had said before, I'll sort of just repeat what you had said. Is like if you're called to the work, there's a reason for that. Even if it shows up, if the universe, which can be the Facebook algorithm in my case,
Yep.
puts that in front of you, there's a reason for that, and usually it's because it's necessary and also that you're ready for it. And but I would also say that it's not 12 weeks and done. It's like 12 weeks to get the education, and then there's an implementation. But I love the fact that you're generous with you do the program over and over and over and over again, which is wonderful for obviously building the repetition of it. And probably the reason I could speak so like pretty effortlessly about nervous system now, because I've watched those videos a bunch, because I got kind of nerdy around it, to be honest. I was like, this stuff's
Yeah.
really interesting.
Yeah.
So I would say if anyone's looking towards the work, just to sort of follow that impulse, don't don't really involve the brain too much, because let it talk you out of it. I think that happens a lot. Um, and just kind of take a leap of faith and go for it. But the way you've structured your business too, there's all these free resources. Like you don't even have to spend
Yeah.
the initial money on your signature program. You could start off pretty slow.
Yeah.
I see Seth alluded to that in his latest email. Just take a drop-in class. It's $19,
Yeah.
or jump into
Yeah.
all the free stuff. There's so much, right?
Well, and it comes down to self commitment. And
Yeah.
we have, again, your peers, some people, have single moms on welfare. Thinking of Fiona, did a talk with her, and she spent 2 years just watching the videos, doing the basic exercises, a class here and there, and
Hmm.
it prepared her to be able to go into the bigger program, which has a lot to it.
Does.
So yeah, there is something for everyone. If the big enchilada is not
Yeah.
quite there for you yet.
That's a big
I
thing
think.
too. The fact that there's
Mm,
lifetime access. I didn't get through my first time I took it. I don't think I got all the way through. Not I
no.
bailed. I bailed. Like the system was like, nope, we're done now. We're stopping here.
Yeah. Yeah. It's common. Most people
Yeah.
don't.
But now I've gotten all the way through it, which is great
Yeah.
because it gets a lot more layered and a lot more. It's just interesting. Then that novelty comes back in, right? You get all the novel stuff that it's just so new. I find my
Hmm.
biggest challenge is and it still is. So it's my own path. It's the Feldenkrais,
Hmm.
because that guy's a genius, but
Hmm.
that work is like Tai Chi slow. It's
Oh yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So if you
Well,
want sort of efforts and practice and slowing down,
yeah.
Those Feldenkrais exercises are great.
Well, and that's why those main more complex lessons aren't until the final
Yeah.
ninth and 10th module. And so I guess I'll give you the challenge of let's talk in a year after you've gone through those and really gotten into them, because
Hmm.
they are, it's very advanced work. And I speak quite openly about the Feldenkrais work being brilliant, but it
Yeah.
needs to be consumed when the person has the capacity to stay still
Mm.
and multitask that awareness and be interested in all these weird movements
Yeah.
that are being taught. It's higher end.
Yeah.
It's masterful work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's challenging in today's world. Which is we're in like the attention economy, right? So people are vying for, and that's getting worse. Good Lord, I just noticed that YouTube's doing shorts now,
Yeah.
like reels or like. Good Lord, what are we doing to attention spans? So yeah, for
Mhm.
someone to sit with anything for any length of time, it seems to be challenging and getting worse,
Yeah.
especially for the kids.
Yeah. Well, let's hope it gets better.
I think it will. I think we're
Yeah.
moving the needle in the right direction. I
I
think
agree.
there's a movement happening.
Hmm.
Not everyone's coming, but that's just the way these things are.
For sure. Thank you. I think that's a good place to end.
You're welcome. It's good to see you, and
Yeah.
thanks for this.
We'll be in touch.
Okay, ciao.
Bye, David.
Bye.
Thanks.